so really what he's getting at here is, with regard to facts, we can, even if we have facts that are contrary to what we believe, if we haven't gotten to the basic presuppositional beliefs, then facts can be dismissed, or we can have rescuing devices that try to explain away the facts. And so facts, aren't what we think they are, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, that's what he says next here.
Right. So facts don't usually resolve conflicts.
Right.
The reason we have debates and you don't see either side of the debate go, well, you argued it better than I did, and you've come out the winner, or you've persuaded more people in the online poll, and therefore you've won. Well, no, it's just, the audience didn't understand, or I had a cold that day, and that person just orated better than I did. Or no, you just didn't understand, and we were talking past each other, which all that may be true as well. And so those factors have to be played in when you're consuming things like debates. And debates aren't, it's a good meeting of ideas because of what the Bible says, having one theory seems right, but then you examine the other, and then you kind of figure out where you're at from there. Again. Yeah. But here's the point. When we bring out these scientific facts, do people say, that's it, there goes my theory, I've got to give it up, no rescuing device, no nothing, you've slayed me with topsoil?
That's right.
No, instead,
the topsoil objection.
Yeah, exactly. The one that's brought down, it plants ideas in people's minds. No,
it sinks their theory.
No, the idea, they move from one rescuing device to another. The facts do not determine what people believe. That is not a very flattering thing to say, and it may require revising your view of human nature. But he says he's convinced that it's true.
Yeah, that is true, that facts do not determine what people believe, which is quite unflattering and actually amazing, right? Yeah. But he's that's the case he's trying to make.
It's why we love Spock. It's Spock is logical. He takes it in. He goes, this is the most logical way. Burn all the rocket fuel because this last-ditch effort is the best solution that we have at this point in time, or we can survive for 30 more minutes. And so he does the most illogical thing, which is the logical thing, and you're supposed to be impressed by it.
That's right.
And you just realize that you're not Spock. You never could be Spock. In fact, the emotional aspect that you lose because of Spock. That's why Spock works so well, because he's half human, half Vulcan. But there's my Star Trek rant for the episode.
And so he says that changing worldviews does not happen easily, right? Even when you present facts. He says when the facts do resolve conflicts, he says you'll notice that the conflict is always, a small or limited controversy that doesn't have a lot of implications right. And doesn't really require that people change their lives or their way of seeing things, right? And he gives this illustration. You and I may have a disagreement about how much it costs to get a Whopper at the local Burger King. But we could walk down to Burger King and look at the sign and see what it costs. And then, of course, you'd see that, I was right all the time. Right. So there. Now, facts have shown, who was right in that situation. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Sure. Whatever. We're all eating bugs at the end anyway, so it's fine. But what if we're talking about the nature of life itself?
So not a burger.
Not the price of the Whopper.
Price of a Whopper.
There you can have it your way, but the very fact of the nature of life, unfortunately, I'm right and you're wrong. But what about whether we're going to answer to a holy God someday? There might be some people that come in conflict with that. What about whether this universe is eternal or was created by God? What if the deity of Christ is brought up? About whether homosexuality is an alternative lifestyle. What if communism is the proper means of carrying out of government and economics?
Yeah.
People have been fighting about this, and the facts don't seem to be the case, even taking people to a grocery store and letting them look upon the majesty of capitalism.
That's right.
Things like that aren't like the price of a Whopper at Burger King. There are high levels of emotional stake here because, depending on answers, people will have to change their lives and maybe their professions. They're going to have to see the world differently.
Right.
And you could say it's easier these days to do so because of the transition that you can make from people groups, and you can hook up with different people. You're not just surrounded by the six neighbors or the country club that you're a part of. And so seeing big cultural changes even back in the day, things like abolitionism, I mean, that was dangerous. You're talking about upsetting the way of human civilization forever. I mean, there's always been slavery. And so to come out and say, no, it is wrong for man to own another man, and it says so here in the Bible, we should live it, right, Christian? You get hung in the street, and you're coming to face that. But at the same time, people are less likely today to probably change their mind because everything has become so embattled in a basic understanding of politics as my initial starting point for worldview, because no one's talking about, well, when does life begin? It doesn't matter. It matters only my happiness. And so we can't even approach the basics of what a worldview used to be. And so people are entrenched in making sure that they can do what they want.
Right. And so when it comes to these large things, right, about, how do we answer a holy God, and is the universe eternal, was it created by God, and that sort of thing. He says when it comes to those sorts of things, the facts don't always move people. And he says, you might think that they should. The facts should move people, right? Okay. And he says, yeah, he agrees they should. But in the real world, they don't. And so the question is, why can't the facts move people with regard to these types of issues as opposed to the price of a Whopper burger?
Right.
And his answer is because the facts don't speak for themselves, right? The way in which you see the facts. In fact, what you take to be a fact, he says, is determined by your underlying assumptions. You will never become a good debater, he tells us, if you don't realize that, right? That there's some underlying assumptions that affects how we view and take the facts. People, he says, are not swayed by the facts, though their initial assumptions or their changed minds can be reinforced by the facts. He says you put a fact on the table and it doesn't change underlying, and here's the issue, philosophical commitments, right? Facts don't change underlying philosophical commitments.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you come up with a rescuing advice, or you dismiss it, you throw it over your shoulder and say, hey, I'll deal with that later, or we'll come up with something that'll explain that later. But the fact doesn't necessarily get with that underlying philosophical commitment.
Yeah. I think a good example that he uses in here is by using kind of Oliver Stone's movie JFK and being kind of a cultural touchstone of being a really good launching point for people to question, well, who killed JFK? Well, the underlying assumption has always been, the government's there to kind of protect us, and we do what's right. It's post World War II into the Cold War, and you're trusting your government, and then you find out things like Iran-Contra, you find things like Bay of Pigs, and you go, can you really trust the government? And then that underlying worldview shift may allow you to go, oh yeah, why was this able to happen? What about all these things? What about these mysterious, second shots or from the grassy knoll and stuff like that? And so the Oliver Stone movie kind of presented it in a way that was digestible to people to kind of question it from a standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, to now where 70% of people believe that at the very least, Lee Harvey Oswald was not the only person invested in the assassination attempt. And so those underlying assumptions have to be moved first before you just get, well, there's a puff of smoke behind this fence post, and the Zapruder film was accidentally played backwards for a number of years, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that was a good example that we can kind of focus on.